we've done a lot of conversations around the importance of the gut microbiome. We've done an entire conversation on the vagus nerve, which connects all the way from our gut up to our brains. But the blood-brain barrier, it's a really important concept. Not many people know much about it. Can you talk to us about why this is so important? Because I guess this is where the nutrients, right, are crossing from one side of the brain into the other. But I don't know that much about it. So
Okay, so for people who don't know about the blood-brain barrier, this is a kind of a grate made of blood vessel cells that separates the brain from the rest of the body. And while it's been labeled and named as blood-brain barrier, it's really a filter as opposed to a barrier. The idea of a barrier, the name, names matter, right? What you call something matters. And barrier sounds like it blocks things. And so this is, by the way, when I went to medical school, this is what we were taught. Blood-brain barrier is absolutely important because it prevents infections from crossing into the brain. It protects you from your brain from toxins. There was sort of an explanation for it that has turned out over the last few decades not to be entirely true. If you have cancer drugs, if you want to protect the brain, the blood-brain barrier protects it. Oh, you can't treat brain tumors with intravenous drugs because it's not going to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. Well, look, we all know that you can treat brain cancer with an intravenous drug. We do know that infections of the body can actually get to the brain. And so there's, I think, a lot of mythology around this term barrier. Think of it more as a filter. And what it does is it's a filter that is designed to allow nutrients, oxygen, growth factors, communication signals to come from all over the body into the brain. And just like the kidney has a filter, just like the liver is a filter, the brain has an interface called the blood-brain barrier. So it is absolutely vital. But I think that, and it's made out of blood vessel cells, endothelial cells. And so how we actually think about the role of the blood-brain barrier should be less of like, what does it block out? And more, I think this is, as a researcher, this is what my work has always been about. How do you take the normative thinking, what everybody believes is blood-brain barrier, it's a barrier. If you flip the script to ask a different question, what is a blood-brain barrier designed to allow? What is it that allows that it's allowing into the brain? If we understood that, we might have even better insights into brain health.
Yeah, because I'm even thinking about it when people talk about supplements, right? And they think about magnesium. Well, if you take one type of magnesium, it will cross the blood-brain barrier. And if you take another type, that it won't. So I guess keeping a healthy function of a blood-brain barrier is really important. And you just said there it's really important with our blood vessels. So how can we make sure that we have a very healthy blood-brain barrier that's working effectively and efficiently?
The answer to that question has to do with what is the blood-brain barrier made out of. It's made out of cells that line blood vessels. So if you think about the blood vessel as a tunnel, the endothelial lining is like plastic wrap that's inside the tube. So this plastic wrap is stretched out as part of the filter, the blood-brain barrier, BBB as we call it, and the health of the endothelium of the blood vessel cells is the health of the blood-brain barrier, but that health is reflected on the health of the endothelium, the lining, and the rest of the body as well. So the best way, and I don't think we can separate, like, I'm just going to take this magic supplement that's only going to be blood-brain barrier. If you start hearing people talk like that, it's probably
pseudoscience.
It's probably a claim that's going to require a huge bar of evidence. But what I will tell you is that because the blood-brain barrier is this filter, and it's made out of vascular endothelial cells, the lining of blood vessels, how healthy your overall blood vessels are, your circulation, and the rest of your body is a good reflection of how healthy your blood-brain barrier is. So you can actually do things to keep better endothelium in your body. Simple things like exercise, regular physical activity helps to keep your blood vessels in motion, circulating, pumping, passaging nutrients and oxygen. That's good for your whole body's blood vessels, including the blood-brain barrier. You want to keep inflammation down because inflammation can damage your endothelium. So think about inflammation like if you were to just pour gasoline onto your rug and put a match to it. You're going to set it on fire. And that's what inflammation does to the lining of your blood vessels. So if you lower inflammation, you'll also be protecting the lining of your blood vessels everywhere, including at the blood-brain barrier. The other thing I would say is a diet. What can we actually eat that is helpful for your endothelium? Turns out that there's some good news here. One of them is that dark chocolate, cacao, is extraordinarily good for nurturing. It's sort of like the it's sort of the health coach of your vascular endothelium. Cacao, the bioactives, the proanthocyanidins, really make a healthy lining of your blood vessels. So dark chocolate's good for your brain.
What percentage?
I generally say that the higher the percentage, the more cacao, which is the plant-based aspect, the higher the polyphenols, the proanthocyanidins. I would say, it's a gradient, but I like to tell people look for 80% or higher. You've crossed the threshold of goodness once you get to 80%.
Okay, that's great, because it's always good to check, because sometimes I buy dark chocolate that says dark chocolate and it's about 50%. So you've actually got to check before you buy it, I think, which is really important. Yeah.
Look for that number. 80 or higher is good.
So when we're thinking about this blood-brain barrier, do you think it impacts our mental health? Because if it's not working as effectively as it should, do you think there's any kind of relation there to how we're feeling, whether it's memory loss or brain fog or anything like that, or on the extreme end, depression or anxiety? Do you think there's any overlap there?
I think that what you're really talking about is not just the blood-brain barrier. You're talking about brain health overall. Yeah. And when you actually have, I think our brain, by the way, is quite resilient, quite well designed, and quite capable of actually maintaining itself within a pretty wide spectrum of life experiences, of toxic exposures. I mean, our brain, think about all the things that we subject ourselves to. When we were kids, tumbling on the ground or taking a fall, we hit our heads. Look, it bounces right back for the most part. And yet, when we think about anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, now you get more serious schizophrenia, and then you move into the cognitive disorders. You are talking about deviations away from that resiliency, right? Because the brain isn't able to bounce back. Arguably, we all get depressed, but most of us don't stay in a state of depression, right? So when we actually move away from that resiliency. That's how I think it's helpful for your listeners and your viewers to think about this, is these mental health issues become significant when we lose our brain's resiliency. All right. What are some of those things that we do know? Because there's a lot we don't know yet. But what we do know, inflammation is very present in the brain, and all of its linings and all of its barriers, the blood-brain barrier being one of them. Yeah, you see problems, not only structurally, but you find problems in the filter part of the brain as well. Is the filter the cause? I don't think so. I think that it's part of the evidence, as part of the detective story, the forensics of looking at what causes deviation from resiliency in the brain. You'll find some of the problems. Some of the smoking gun is also found in the blood-brain barrier, but in other parts of the brain as well.
So what should we be doing then to think about keeping this all healthy and together, apart from some dark chocolate? Because I'm guessing there's lots of kind of science out there talking about our gut health and how that kind of crosses up and supports our brain health. But what would be your kind of 5 tips to keep mental health in check?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, so let's play this out in a scenario.
Yeah, I'm ready.
We're on a ship. We get shipwrecked on an island. All right, and so the question is, the question you asked me is, how would I stay as mentally healthy as possible? Yeah. All right. So you're starting with 0, okay? Because the boat sank and we're on the sand. Okay. So number 1, what I would actually say is that you do want to find food that is not only nourishing for your muscles, but you want to make sure that you're finding and eating foods that's actually good for your gut. Anything with fiber, plant-based foods. Prebiotic foods are basically colorful foods that have the polyphenols that also contribute to feeding our gut microbiome. So, the colorful ones, red, yellow, and orange peppers, the greens. And by the way, I don't know if you're a painter, but I do a lot of art. Green is a beautiful color. There's so many shades of green, and if you take a look at the really deep, almost black green of lacinato kale, the dinosaur kale, versus the bright greens that you might actually find in a Bib lettuce, for example, it's actually a pretty cool color. Like you could paint a whole room, or you can make a painting out of these different greens. And so again, it's not just green versus orange, but even within the same color tone, there are the spectrum. And so that's why you don't need to just kind of like pick, a red or an orange and a blue and a green. Go to the produce market and look at the diversity of colors. Even with things that look green or look red, you'll see all this diversity. And that's where the beauty is. Mother Nature has put all these bioactives. So bioactives are prebiotics. Prebiotics do a lot of things to your health defenses, do a lot of things that are good, by the way, for your vascular endothelium, good for the lining of your blood vessels, and therefore good for your blood-brain barrier. But they all work in a beneficial way to feed your gut microbiome. Healthy gut is healthy brain, and polyphenols will do this, but also dietary fiber. Dietary fiber could come from the stringy vegetables, the broccoli or the broccoli stems. You wind up chewing on them for a long time. Or carrots have a lot of dietary fiber. But don't be fooled. The stringiness of a plant-based food doesn't necessarily tell you about its fiber. So, for example, pears have a reasonable amount of dietary fiber. A ripe, juicy pear, about 6 grams of dietary fiber in a medium-sized pear. Amazing, right? Peaches, bright summer peach, juicy peach, also has a reasonable amount of dietary fiber. You want to look for the softest vegetable that I know, or softest produce that I know, avocado.
I was going to say, is an avocado, yeah.
Amazing source of dietary fiber. So mushrooms, also a good source of dietary fiber. So don't judge the book by the texture, but you have to just know. By the way, you can look this up. You can look up how much dietary fiber is. There are tables and charts. You can look up online to be able to get an idea. So dietary fiber, polyphenols, what's good for the body is going to be good for the brain.